Could you believe this Afghan-born Muslim, whose singular purpose is peace in Palestine, has decided to call herself Australia's voice? Honestly, you couldn't make this stuff up. Is she a federal senator or a professional troll? Sadly, she's serious. Have a listen to her on the ABC's 7:30 last night, where she couldn't agree that the October 7 attack on Israel was terrorism.
Yesterday, in your view, were the actions of Hamas on that day an act of terrorism or an act of resistance?
I think that question really not only ignores the 75, 76 years, but also reduces the Palestinian plight. And we need to acknowledge that Palestinians and now the Lebanese community are hurting, but so are the Israeli communities.
Seriously, if she is Australia's voice, then Hamas is a peace-loving organisation spreading diversity, equity and inclusion through the Middle East. Australians gave her a voice. I might point out a voice she would never have had in Afghanistan, where she was born, or in Gaza, which seems to occupy most of her thinking. But for her to call herself Australia's voice, that takes some front, Liz.
It really does. I mean, and it has been rightly made a lot of mockery. There's a lot of mirth happening on X and other platforms about this. But it does bemuse me that we seem to be incapable of understanding that, quite simply, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Like, these guys are looked up to in the Middle East by millions of people as liberators, as their fighters, as members of their parliaments. Like, Hezbollah has 15 seats in the Lebanese parliament. We call them terrorists. We seem to have no understanding of the fact that in that part of the world, it's the West that are seen as terrorists. And when we import people from that part of the world with their cultural background, with their narrative of the world, they're thinking of what America did in Syria, in Libya, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. And this is their narrative.
It's more than a narrative, though. It's values.
Oh, 100%. So we import their values, their religion, their blood memories. It's all there. And then we wonder why Arabs are supporting Arabs. Muslims are siding with Muslims. Well, Beryl hit me with another hot take. I mean, of course they are. But notice it's only in Western countries that we allow people with values so opposed to our own to sit in our federal parliaments. I mean, it's quite mind-blowing. And I'm sure countries like the ones that we pick on in China, in Russia, these people that we call dictatorships, at least they're not standing for any of this.
Wow, it's so much to unpack. Yeah, look, I think, I've been saying for some time, and I think other people are smart enough to realise it too, that we do have to understand that exactly what you said, that, you know, that these people do not understand, and it's not just people from Afghanistan or from the Middle East or Arabs, it's people in Australia as well who have refused to call Hamas a terrorist organisation, for example.
Well, they're a different...
Overprivileged little snot-nosed uni kids and student socialists have been very prepared to do that as well. And I think that is where... But I do think there is a case where if you have been completely and utterly indoctrinated with, for example, Hamas propaganda in Gaza, you are not going to know that the rest of the world sees them as a terrorist, or the free world or Australia sees them as a terrorist organisation. I can understand that. Fatima Payment does not have that excuse. Fatima Payment has got basically every possible privilege you could imagine. There is almost no position in Australian society than being an Australian senator.
I agree, but at the end of the day, she is an Afghan Muslim, and I can't believe she's siding with them.
But I think this is the thing, though. If after all that, it's one thing if she just stepped off the boat from Kabul and said, "Oh, what are you talking about? The Taliban's aren't. They're not a terrorist organisation. They're a wonderful bunch of people. You know, sure, they don't let me read or write or go to school, but you know, what do you mean?" But for her to have lived most of her life here and to have achieved the rank of Australian senator, to have access to any library in the country, including the Australian Parliamentary Library, and still not to be able to see and say that clearly not even that Hamas is a terrorist organisation, but what happened on October 7th is a terrorist act.
How many libraries do you need to visit to work out
say
rape
that
is
or
terrorism?
Understand that from all the information that is available to you, just that act alone, and just say, yes, that is an act of terror, then there is something, I think, profoundly either wrong with you on a sort of moral, human level, or you are severely limited in your intelligence and your ability to process information. And that is about as kind as I can possibly be. And notwithstanding the fact that she has launched Australia's Voice, which clearly is trying to nick some of the rhetoric of the Voice referendum that happened in Australia last year and was called The Voice, right? So she's clearly ripping off that brand and trying to sort of capitalise on it. Or maybe her new chief of staff or advisor, Glenn Drury, the preference whisperer, is putting some of these ideas in her head. So just call yourself everything. So, oh yeah, I like Australia, I like The Voice, I'll vote for that. They've got no policies. They've got I don't even know if they've got any members apart from her and this guy who's really the gaming election. And they didn't even consult the actual Indigenous people in charge of The Voice.
But Joe, all of this is true, right? But she would never have had the platform she now has if the Labor Party weren't committed to identity politics, where they put a kid
I don't even know
nothing going for her except she was female and a Muslim and had come from Afghanistan. They were her qualities. It's diversity, and so they gave her a platform, and now we're reaping the rewards.
I'm not even sure if they expected her to win the seat, because of course the numbers in WA that came in late on election night were so stratospherically huge that it delivered this windfall without which the government might even be in minority already. So I'm not sure it's particularly expected her to win, but whether it was a box-ticking exercise or not, she would not be in the parliament were it not for the Australian Labor Party next to her name in the Senate. The fact that she is still there when there is absolutely no way she would ever win an election based on her own intellect or her own values or her own policies, of which she has none. The fact that she has refused to do the right thing and vacate the seat for another Labor member, and the fact that she has now had the audacity to say that she, and apparently she alone, is Australia's voice without actually providing any kind of community, policy, any other evidence of all. I mean, that is a level of hubris which I think is so titanically, ridiculously over the top that it actually points to someone who is either monomaniacal or, frankly, just not all there. And I don't know which that is, but it is just nuts.